different translations, very, very controversial thing. First, I would say the four best translations that are out there that I know of, because now they're coming up with a lot of new translations, and most of those newer ones really stink. But there's probably some newer translations that are really good, but I just don't have time. So the four that I'm familiar with that are really good translations would be the King James, but I would eliminate that one because it's written in King James English. I can't make heads or tails out of King James English. So I got enough problems going into the Greek and the Hebrew. Now I got to try to learn King James English. I don't like Shakespeare. I don't understand this stuff. It's a complex language. That just creates too many problems for me to get at the meaning. So I have respect for it, very poetic, but the English language has taken a nosedive. We're devolving. We're not evolving. And we don't even have, everybody used to make fun of me when I came over because I used to say, hey, how are you doing? Okay? So, but in the South, they get made fun of because they say, y'all. Okay? That's not the sign of dumber people. That's the sign of intelligent people in the Northeast, yous, and in the South, y'all, that recognize the deficiency in the current state of the English language. When you lose the second person plural, okay, if you can't even come up with a word for the second person plural, talking baby talk, okay? So, yeah, the King James English is beautiful. The problem is it's over our heads, okay? So I would say the New King James, and then there's the NIV and the New American Standard. Let me say something about the NIV. They went out of their way to make a really good reading Bible, but by doing that, they got into this principle called the dynamic equivalent, where you try to get the idea more than a word-for-word translation. So it's not a really good study Bible. If you use it as a study Bible and you don't go into the Greek and the Hebrew, it can really lead you astray, and that was not the intent of the translators. So the two best study Bibles, if you're just studying it in the English, New American Standard and the New King James. Now the thing is, the New American Standard is based on the oldest manuscripts we could find, and primarily Sinaiticus and Vaticanus, which date back to about the mid-4th century A.D., and then some manuscripts that predate that, or the majority text, which went into the New King James. Not exactly the Textus Receptus, the received text, but the majority of the manuscripts, which is almost synonymous with that. And it depends where you side. Good scholars side with the older manuscripts, and some good scholars side with the majority text, okay? I used to preach from the New American Standard. Now I favor the New King James. Reason being this: the majority text, when you examine the majority text, is 99.5% agreement when you compare all the manuscripts. It's over 25,000 manuscripts, okay? When you get to the older manuscripts, Sinaiticus and Vaticanus alone, they disagree more than 3,000 times just in the Gospel of Matthew. So just because they're older doesn't mean they're better, okay? And so I would disagree with colleagues like James R. White, brilliant guy, the late Dr. Walter Martin. They went to the older ones. I used to be in that camp. Now I'm at the point where, and then there's some other arguments too. I think it's more likely that a copyist would accidentally leave out a line rather than purposely add a line. So the larger the manuscript, the more likely it represents. That's the way I think, because my wife used to do my typing. She would never add to my writing and say, you know, he needs to enforce this point, you know, on his school paper. I'm going to add a few things. No, because it was the word of her husband. Ooh, you know, the word of her husband. She would never add to my manuscript, but she might accidentally leave out a paragraph. Okay, so basically, if you take the NIV and you preach most of the stuff that's down in the at the bottom of the page, and the New American Standard, and read what's bracketed out in the text, for all practical purposes, that's just about synonymous with what's in the King James. Okay, I'm just not sure. I mean, even some of the manuscripts, Mark 16 ends abruptly, but there's enough space for the exact number of lines that are in the majority text. So it was almost like, and then you have corrections in Sinaiticus and Vaticanus as if they knew it's a bad copy. As we get better copies, we'll make the changes as needed. So just because it's older does not necessarily mean that it's better. There's usually 7 or 8 different tests that are used to determine manuscripts. And since we found old manuscripts, we just act like, well, if it's older, it's better, period. Let's ignore these principles. But good men disagree. If you're using the New American Standard, the NIV, or the New King James, or the King James, if you can make it out. I mean, if you like reading Shakespeare, the King James isn't going to be a problem for you. With me, it's over my head. But it'll probably be the last question, I think.
Okay, don't forget when referring to all these Bibles that the Bible basically went from Greek to Latin to German and then English.
Not really. I mean, it was translated in that order, but not from that. It's not like the Mormons want us to think it's like a telephone game. Like they took the Greek, translated it into Latin, then they translated the Latin into German, then they translated the German into English. No, we go back to the Greek and Hebrew. We translate right from the Greek and Hebrew. So it's not like this big telephone game where we're really losing track on it. No, we have access. There's the Nestle Abelard 26th edition. That is what the New American Standard and New King James are, and you can buy that. You can buy the Greek New Testament today and see the Greek text that was produced from all these thousands of Greek manuscripts, and they compared them. And the New King James and the King James have their own Greek text, which differs very little, okay? And so we go right to the Greek and the Hebrew. We have, copies of the Septuagint, the Greek translation of the Hebrew Old Testament, but we still go to the Hebrew, the original language in which it was written, before we make the translation. So just keep that in mind. It's not like the telephone game. That's what the Mormons want us to think. No, we got the Greek, we got the Hebrew, we go right back to it. And so as Greek and Hebrew scholars translate our Bible, so our newer translations go directly to the original languages, to English.